You know that feeling, right? That tiny little spark of pleasure you get when a rival team completely blows a game-winning play? Or maybe when that coworker who's always bragging gets a big project shot down. It's a weird feeling. Sometimes it's even a little uncomfortable. But you know what? It's a deeply human one. So today, we're going to unpack the psychology behind that malicious pleasure we sometimes feel when things go wrong for other people.
And this is not a new idea. Way back in 1887, the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche was all over it. He called it a human, all-too-human principle. He was basically saying, look, this isn't some weird modern flaw. It's baked right into our DNA. But notice what he did there. He drew a line between simply seeing suffering and actively causing it.
And that right there is the central question for us. Is that quiet little smirk you have when you watch a rival fail the same thing as the absolute triumphant joy of defeating them yourself? Well, psychologists are pretty clear on this. No, not at all. They're fundamentally different things. Okay, let's dive into this.
Now, you've probably heard the most famous word for this feeling. It comes from German, Schadenfreude, and it literally translates to harm joy. But here's the thing, while the word might be German, the feeling itself is completely universal. I mean, it's recognized in cultures all over the globe.
So first, we have to make a really, really crucial distinction here. This comes from some great research by Colin Leach and his team. They basically argue that we tend to lump two very different emotions under one big umbrella. So let's pull them apart. Let's separate the pleasure of watching misfortune from the pleasure of causing it. So, true Schadenfreude, think of it as a spectator's pleasure. You are totally passive, you're just an observer, right? Your rival's business fails because of a bad economy, or their star player gets injured by some other player on the field. You didn't do a single thing to cause it, but you still feel that little flicker of satisfaction.
Gloating, on the other hand, that's a whole different animal. That is an active, earned pleasure. This is when you are the one who caused their misfortune. You beat your rival for that big promotion. You scored the winning goal against their team. You directly caused their defeat, and the pleasure you feel from that is it's on another level entirely.
This table really just lays it all out so clearly. With Schadenfreude, you're on the sidelines, a passive observer. The cause is external, somebody or something else did it. The power you feel is pretty low, the pleasure is moderate, and you're probably going to keep it to yourself. But with gloating, you're the main character. You're the active cause. The agency is all you. The feeling of power is sky high, and the pleasure is triumphant. That's something you are much more likely to shout from the rooftops.
So, to put it really simply, if Schadenfreude is that quiet, hidden smile you try to suppress, gloating is the full-on victory dance you do in the end zone. The crucial point here is that they are fundamentally different experiences. They're driven by totally different circumstances, and they lead to totally different behaviors.
Okay, let's peel back another layer of this onion. Now that we've separated passive Schadenfreude from active gloating, we can actually break Schadenfreude itself down even further. Because it turns out not all harm joy is created equal.
Research from Xin-Sheng Wang and his colleagues gives us this fantastic three-part model. They argue that what we just call Schadenfreude is really a family of three distinct feelings, and each one has its own unique motivation: aggression, rivalry, and justice. First up, there's aggression. This is pure classic us versus them. It's totally rooted in our tribal instincts and our social identity. You feel it when a rival country's Olympic team gets disqualified, or maybe when the opposing political party has a very public meltdown. Their loss feels like a win for your group. Simple as that. Second, we have rivalry. Now this one's much more personal. It's driven by envy and social comparison. You feel this when the person who got the job you really wanted gets fired, or when that perfect couple you follow on social media suddenly announces their breakup. Their stumble, in a way, temporarily levels the playing field, and it can actually soothe your own feelings of inferiority. And third, there's justice. This is the morally righteous version. It's the pleasure you feel when a corrupt CEO is finally arrested, or a hypocritical public figure gets exposed. You feel this deep satisfaction because it feels like the world just got a little more fair, a little more balanced. And this just brilliantly shows how the same core emotion, pleasure at another's misfortune, can come from very different and sometimes even conflicting moral places. So, if we all have these complex feelings, where do they actually come from? Well, it turns out the roots are planted very, very early in our development.
The timeline of how they develop is just fascinating.
The seeds of aggression Schadenfreude show up in infancy. I mean, studies show that babies as young as 9 months old prefer puppets that harm other, dissimilar puppets. Isn't that wild? Then rivalry follows in early childhood, as social comparison kicks in and kids start caring about who has more toys. And finally, a sense of justice Schadenfreude develops in later childhood, when kids really start to understand and enforce social norms, and they get a real kick out of seeing rule breakers get their comeuppance.
Now, beyond our development, our personality plays a huge role. There's a cluster of traits known as the dark tetrad. That's psychopathy, narcissism, Machiavellianism, and everyday sadism. And people who score high on these have a much greater tendency to feel all kinds of Schadenfreude. The common thread here is a kind of callousness, a reduced concern for how other people feel.
But it's not just about having dark traits. Something as common as low self-esteem is another powerful predictor, especially for that envy-driven rivalry Schadenfreude we talked about. It makes sense, right? When you're feeling down about yourself, seeing someone you think is better take a fall can give you a temporary but very welcome boost to your own sense of self-worth.
Okay, so we've deconstructed this feeling into all its little component parts. But why does any of this matter in the real world? Well, because the social consequences of these feelings are vastly different.
See, Schadenfreude, in all its forms, is mostly a private thing. It happens inside your head, it gives you a little psychological boost, but it's probably not going to escalate a conflict all by itself. But gloating? Oh, gloating is like a social grenade. It's a public performance of superiority that's designed to belittle your opponent. It doesn't just end a conflict, it very often fuels the next one, sparking a desire for revenge and just keeping that whole cycle of antagonism going.
So let's just quickly recap the key takeaways from all this. First, always remember that fundamental split. There's passive Schadenfreude and there's active gloating. They are not the same. Second, within Schadenfreude, you've got its 3 faces: the tribal aggression, the envious rivalry, and the righteous justice. And finally, just remember that these feelings aren't random. They are woven deep into our developmental psychology and our personalities.
And that brings us to the final thought I want to leave you with. The next time you feel that little flash of pleasure at someone else's expense, just pause for a second and ask yourself, which version of me is smiling right now? Is it the tribal loyalist, the insecure rival, or the righteous judge? Understanding the answer, well, it tells you a lot about the moment, and it tells you even more about yourself.